Hello and welcome to the Care It Out Sleep Show, a podcast for tired parents who are searching for a bit more sleep the caring way. I'm your host, Cara Sayer, infant sleep consultant, founder of my unique sleep approach, Care It Out, and your caring sleep supporter. I really hope you'll join me on my mission to get snores a settled night's sleep without the tears, training or techniques. I love talking about sleep and I can't wait to share my sleep subjects with you. My approach to getting you more sleep is simple, straightforward, but above all, it's got to make sense and feel best for you. Ready to get more sleep? Then let's get started.
Hello and welcome to the Sleep Show. You are listening to your host, Cara Sayer, and today on the show I am super excited to have a very special guest for us. I am going to be I'm going to be talking with the Chief Sleep Officer, aka Cara Sayer, inventor of SnoozeShade, and I can't wait to hear the SnoozeShade story and hear what she's got to say for herself. How are you, Cara?
I'm very well, thank you, on this rather grim day.
It is so grim, isn't it? I can't believe I just said I'm going to be sleeping. I really doubt with the two of us there's going to be any sleeping on this podcast.
Well, I'm a chief sleep officer.
All talking. You're going to give me a run for my money, Cara.
I think so.
Well, I am so excited to be speaking to you today because it's taken us a long time. We're both clearly very busy people, but I am really, really excited.
Me too.
That's very nice to hear. I'm actually quite a pedantic person, but I am quite, I will only push a parenting product if I'm 100% behind it. I wouldn't just push it for the sake of it. And all the products, which actually aren't that very many, I think there's a handful, I personally have used and absolutely love. And I've loved SnoozeShade since my nannying days. And yeah, I can't wait. I've personally used it. I absolutely love it. I call it my sleep saviour. I can't wait to hear your story. So why don't we start right at the beginning and tell us a little bit about the SnoozeShade and how it came about?
So I was very lucky to get pregnant. I had IVF and I was pregnant with my daughter, who's now a scary 12 years old. When she was tiny, I was actually in a wheelchair while I was pregnant with her. I was in a wheelchair for about 9 months. And I'll tell you what, that gives you a different perspective on life. And the way people talk to people in wheelchairs is just ridiculous, or don't talk to them. Actually, they tend to talk over them. But anyway, I was in a wheelchair and I had to learn how to walk again. And so as soon as I was up and able to walk, I was out there with the pram all the time. And Holly was born at the end of October. So by the time I was up and around again, it was probably like February. So I'd do things like I'd walk to the supermarket to buy some breakfast stuff, and then I'd go back home, and then I'd walk back to the supermarket, buy some lunch, walk to the supermarket. I'd walk her everywhere. I'd take her for walks round. I used to live, I lived not that far away, about half an hour away from Virginia Water Lake in Surrey, and I used to go walking around that. And I was just very excited to be up and around again, but it was quite chilly and cold, and Holly was definitely a baby who needed her sleep. So like a lot of mums, I sort of felt, well, I had to stay in when she needed her sleep. I also wanted to do, for example, a buggy fit class, and I never did it because the timings always clashed with Holly's nap time. And I just thought, like, there's no point committing to something every week that I can't do every week. And, all these things sort of, happen. Anyway, so I used to do things like hanging blankets and muslins and coats and all sorts all over the pram. And then, because I didn't want her to get cold, and then I'd be freezing. And then the coat would fall off the pram and the pram would roll over it. And I'd end up with a mud mark all over my coat and, all this.
Remember those days.
Exactly. And then I sort of moved it. Then we moved into spring and then summer. And then I was worried about sun protection. And again, it's really interesting how many mums you see or parents walking around with sunglasses on, and the child is facing directly into the sun, and you can see them, poor little things, with their hands over their eyes and that sort of thing. But the culminative moment was I was sat in a restaurant having lunch with my NCT friends, and there were about 5 or 6 of us, and everyone had fed their babies, and then basically everyone started putting a muslin on, putting a pashmina, putting a cardigan, putting something over the pram in order to encourage baby to go to sleep. And I just thought, surely there must be something out there that must help babies sleep when they're out and about, a bit like a blackout blind for the window. And, to this day, I still don't really know why I became so obsessed. But it just really got to me. And I just thought, this is something I think other parents can really do with. I know I can do with it. And I sort of came up with the idea. I went off and I bought completely the wrong sort of fabric from a fabric shop and sewed a very shoddy version, which actually I think I've still got somewhere, which is quite funny to look at every now and then.
Good to see how far you've come.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be in business if I'd made it me making it. My sewing skills ain't that great. And then I did things like, I went on, I think it was like Net Mums and Mums Net and things like that. And I sort of said, oh, what does anyone think about this idea? And people were like, oh, yeah, it sounds quite good. And, and I was like, well, does anyone want to test them? And they were like, oh, yeah, that'd be good. So I was like, okay, fine. And then I thought about, well, how am I going to make this thing? Because, what do I do? And, I didn't reinvent the wheel, that's for sure, in terms of, what I actually did is I took what was a sort of mosquito net, and there was a UV net, and there were various other products that were sort of universal fit. And I didn't really like them, so I sort of tweaked them and changed them and added things to it and took things away. And, and what I ended up with was unique. I mean, that was the weird thing. There wasn't anything else out there. And I worked with somebody, I many years ago, I used to work for a baby magazine. And when on the front of the magazines, of baby magazines, I don't know if you remember, this is probably about 15 years ago, there always used to be lots of freebies on the front. There was a free spoon, a free plate, a free this, free that. I used to jokingly say one day they were going to cover mount a real baby onto the front because there was always free gifts. And one of the things I did know, though, was that we had to massively safety test all of those products, because obviously you can't give away a free spoon or a plate if it's going to break either in the baby's mouth or whatever. So safety has always been something that I am massively obsessed with. Having, I've got one daughter, and I hope to keep her alive as long as physically possible. And I'm always been massively, I'm very, very risk averse person as well. So safety was hugely important right from the word go. Anyway, so I contacted a friend of mine, said, who's doing the cover mounts? She put me in touch with a lady called Helen, who I still work with now, like nearly 10 years on. As I say, I sort of came up with the concept, drew some drawings, said, well, this is sort of what it needs to look like, blah, blah, blah. And eventually came up with a prototype of this product. And I spent many a happy hour or so in my local mother care, where I was known as the Mad Shade Lady. Because I'd be standing there, like, trying it on every single different type of pram to make sure it fit and, fitted and all that sort of thing. And then, I mean, I had a bit of postnatal depression after I had Holly. So I think I started the idea in 2008, because I had registered the domain, I think, back in 2008 for SnoozeShade.com. But then I think it was only until it's 2009, I then sort of picked it back up again. And plus I went through another round of IVF in 2009, which failed sadly, but that was at the end of the year. And so, there was a lot going on personally as well. So it didn't sort of rush ahead as quickly as probably had I not been doing all that, it would have done. But what happened was I ended up with this prototype, and all my friends thought it was a good idea, and I was like, well, okay. And then I thought, right, what am I going to do? So there was a baby products show that was in London, and I thought, well, I'd rather go to that and see whether people like the idea than go on something like Dragon's Den, because everyone's like, oh, why don't you go on Dragon's Den? And I was just like, oh, God, no, how embarrassing would that be? You go on and then everyone goes, oh, that's a really crap idea. And so I thought, no, I'm going to go to the show. And I thought it'd be more useful as well, to be honest, because I'd be talking to retailers who actually talk to customers, and and they would hopefully have a good idea of what would sell. So that's what I did. Me and my mum, we rocked up. Funnily enough, both of us in former sort of lives had been event organisers, and we were used to doing very slick events, etc. Anyway, we rocked up literally with my old pram that I'd bought from a sale somewhere, and some posters that we printed out at the local copy shop. It was very, very shonky. But it was great, and we chatted to loads of people, got lots of feedback, and everyone loved the idea. The only person who didn't actually was a man who just didn't seem to. He said, "Oh, I've never used anything like that," and we sort of thought, "Well, no, you probably wouldn't." And but everybody else, really liked the idea and the concept. So I then decided. Then that's right. Then I was opposite the Sophie La Giraffe distributor, UK distributor, who's a really good friend of mine now, and she basically had Jojo Mam and Bebby on her stand. She pointed them over to me and sort of said, "Oh, why don't you go and have a look at SnoozeShade?" And anyway, they came over and that was it. They loved the idea of it and placed an order for, it was 120 units. And I was like, "Oh my God." And it was like, "Yes, and can you deliver it by March or something?" I was like, "Oh yes, of course." Thinking, "Oh my God, what am I going to do?" So that sort of started it off, and then I had a lot of interest from other people, and then I went to a trade. So I went into full-scale production. To this day, I don't really know why I decided to order as many as I did, but I mean, I ordered 10,000 units because I thought, well, there are 750,000 babies born, every year. If I can sell to whatever 7,500 is, mental maths is not my area of expertise. I always have a calculator in my hand, but whatever 7,500 is out of 750,000, I thought, well, if I can do that, that's a very, very tiny amount. Surely I must be able to do that. And then I upped it to 10,000 because I got a better price. And I just thought, well, why not? And my mum said to me basically, well, if you don't sell it, we can sell them at car boot sales for the next few years. So that was my backup plan. Anyway, it went into production. I got it before we actually received product. It was I got it into John Lewis, Mothercare. I got a UK distributor. It was selling obviously at Jojo, and then it went into Tesco. It was a bestseller on Amazon. And yeah, the first year just sort of flew by really. It was rather. I mean, it was massively stressful. I actually had a full-on nervous breakdown. I went through another round of IVF, and it was all around the time when the business was like starting in the March, April, and I think it was June, and I just literally fell over, and I was ill for about 3 months. My mum moved in and looked after me and my daughter, and and then obviously, what's the first thing you do after you've had a full nervous breakdown? Is you go to an international trade show in Germany as soon as you feel better.
As you better?
Which is what I did. And then I started selling to Australia, United Arab Emirates, etc., and Germany, and went sort of worldwide quite quickly. So it was just a really amazing journey, I suppose.
It sounds amazing. I've heard this story numerous times, and I'm never ever going to get sick of it, Cara, because I think sometimes some of the most amazing inventions or the things that we come up with, that sometimes it can be the most simple idea that can actually have the biggest impact.
Funnily enough, my business name outside of SnoozeShade is Really Simple Ideas, because
funny!
I know.
I didn't know that.
It's because everyone says, "Oh, it's a really simple, it's a simple idea," and I just thought, oh, that's a really good name for a company. So that's my parent company, and then SnoozeShade is the brand.
Makes sense.
Yeah, no, it was funny, and so that was sort of how it all started, and then the other part of the process I didn't mention, which was like pretty critical, was the whole safety element as well, whereby what I decided was that, as I said, I am very risk averse, so I didn't want parents suing me because their child choked on a zip or something like that, and I would never be able to sleep if anything like that could happen.
Yeah.
So what I did is I was sort of saying, well, how do I make this as safe as it can be? What's the maximum that I can go to? Now, most products of what they call baby gear, they are usually tested so that they would be safe enough for a 3-year-old, because the concept is that really the baby isn't going to be using the product, but because the adult will be using it with the baby. Whereas I went a step further. So my products are actually safe enough for a newborn to literally use, stroke, eat, whatever. So, for example, I use these ridiculously strong zips. They're the same safety standard as the YKK zip. which is the sort of industry leader. And I think we use YKK something else. I can't remember what it is. Anyway, we use. So, sort of don't compromise on the cost of materials, and making sure. So sometimes people go, oh, SnoozeShade's not as easy to fit. It would be easier if it had 2 long straps. And I'm like, yes, it would be easier, but unfortunately that would be a strangulation and entrapment hazard. And you can't have toggles, you can't have buttons, nothing. Basically I'm all about the function and the safety versus whether it looks nice. And I mean, interestingly enough, when I first started, quite a few parents had quite a big negative reaction. I mean, I went to the baby show at the NEC, and people would come up to me and go, I would never put my child under that, because it was black.
Yeah.
And that was a weird thing to see, was babies under black, because normally babies are under pretty colors, or patterns and that sort of thing. But the problem was that the fabric that I use is a mesh, and it's a special air permeable mesh, which means the air passes through it. And the problem is it looks a bit like a sports fabric, like footballers' shirts. So when it's in a colour, when it's got a pattern on it, it looks awful.
Yeah.
You can't put a pattern on it. So A, it looks awful, but B, also the other reason why all the products are dark is because actually darker colours naturally absorb UV. So you don't have to use any chemicals or UV treatments on the fabric, because the black colour actually does it naturally. And the fact that it's made from a polyester, because some people are like, oh, it'd be great if it was organic. I'm like, yes, it would be great. But unfortunately, organic fabrics tend to actually absorb heat, and they also absorb moisture, and therefore, they're not as air permeable, because breathable is a word that gets used a lot, but actually it's not the right word, because breathable is actually all about moisture wicking, which is how moisture moves around. And actually what you want air permeable fabric, which is where the air moves through it. So all of these things, that you have to kind of take into consideration, are things that I have thought about and, put in. So every time I design a product, none of the straps exceed 22 centimeters when stretched. All the zips are super, super high quality. I mean, the zips are one of the most expensive parts of my products. But also, making sure that I use, an accredited factory. My factories are used by, brands like L'Oreal and, very, very large, big corporates as well. And, are all sort of, certified and all the rest of it. And, it's just, I think for me, it's all about quality. It's all, when I buy a product, I mean, I try and keep, I've kept my prices pretty much the same since I started 10 years ago, and my manufacturing costs have obviously gone up. But, I just feel like, for example, for the original $19.99, it's a good price, and I don't really feel like I feel comfortable with it getting too much higher than that. And as long as I can keep prices down, I will,
Yeah.
Because I'm all about, trying to give really good value, because and baby products often, God, I mean, I bought one of the Bumbos, for example, for Holly, but bless her little thighs were so fat that by the time her thighs were less chunky and she could actually sit in it, she was too mobile. So, that was £35 or £40 or whatever it was. I never saw again.
Yeah. Parenting product. And I think this is, well, actually going back right to the beginning about what you're saying, that's really fascinating. I've definitely learned some stuff there, like about the material and getting airflow. Like, I know that it had to be airflow, but I was definitely using the wrong word. But going back what you're saying right at the beginning, what is it about the timing of classes with little ones? They're never at the best time, is it?
No, it's always lasted nap time. It's just,
it's always going to be a nap time for a little one. But yeah, I totally really took you that.
I really do think there is that. Well, I suppose the problem is also you've got mums who've got older children and who've got to do pickups and various other things. So I get that, but it was always slap bang. It was either so early in the morning I was like, no way, because I've only just got. Or it would be nap time, and then I was just like, oh no, I just can't do it every day. And I mean, also we used to go out and eat meals, with Holly's father and I, we used to go out for a meal in a restaurant, and then we'd take her with us, and then she'd sit in the pram sleeping away because it was night time, and she was happy as Larry. So
who is this Larry person that's so happy?
I don't know, but I'd really like to know where that phrase comes from.
Me too. I use it always. One of my I love that phrase. I love a phrase, but that's one of my favourites. And I'm like, who is Larry? It's always very happy.
Oh, no, what's the other one? There's that other one which is who's that? He was like an Australian pilot or something like that. The one, anyway, it'll come back to me in a minute. There's one of those silly expressions. And I always go, who's that?
It's so funny. And I think a lot of the listeners will be able to resonate with what you said about becoming obsessed with naps and becoming sleep obsessed, because it's such an important part. And I know that I definitely talk about this a lot, how naps really are the foundation to a good night's sleep. Like, they're not a guarantee you're given, because it's very rare that it's just one thing, but they are really important to help you on your way to settle night's sleep. And I think it's completely natural to get obsessed over sleep, trying to get them to nap.
I think the thing is, when you see, like, Holly generally was a good sleeper, but, when I did make mistakes, I made mistakes sometimes by letting her sleep too long in the afternoon, for example, because I was tired, and then I'd let her have too much sleep, and then she wouldn't want to go to sleep. But I also saw the other side of it, which was, a lot of people were like, oh, well, just keep them awake then. And you're like, yeah, but if you do that, you then end up with a really broken child later on, who then is so overwired and overtired. And interesting enough, I've become a bit of a sleep nerd because of SnoozeShade, obviously. My whole life is based around like helping babies sleep, and I'm fascinated by the science behind it. And, babies actually produce cortisol, which is the stress hormone, when they don't get enough sleep. And actually the sleep dampens down the cortisol levels, which means then, I always say to people, imagine that you've just got off a plane from America and you've got that horrible wired and tired feeling, which is where you're really exhausted, but you just can't sleep.
Yeah.
And that's what you're doing to your baby when you don't give them proper naps.
Yeah. You are preaching to the converted here, Cara, because I spend my days talking about cortisol, or what I like to call baby Red Bull.
I like that. I haven't heard that before. That's really good.
Yeah. So yeah, I call myself a little sleep geek. I'm all about the sleep science.
And also, the problem is also, I think, is that, we all lead such busy lives. When I was a baby, I'm a 70s baby, and, there were no baby classes. There were no real activities for things to do. So, I probably went to the park and probably that was about it, Whereas now it's all, I think it's great, don't get me wrong. And I took Holly to all sorts of things like monkey music.
I remember those days.
This program. I took her to monkey music. I took her to tumble tots. I took her to all sorts of stuff. I took her to play groups and that sort of thing. But the thing is that we expect babies to be able to sleep through wherever we take them. And actually, I get quite a lot of parents. It really does make me laugh in a really sweet way, because I get people who are like, oh my goodness, my child has never slept. And they've just slept for 2 hours. I'm like, yes, it's because when they wake up, they can't see anything, not in a scary way, but literally there's nothing that attracts their attention. So they just literally kind of eyes flutter open and then go back to sleep again, because there's nothing. They can't see mummy's face. They can't see the playground. They can't see little brother. They can't see man in restaurant as they're walking past, see anything. And actually then I do jokingly, but semi-seriously say I bore babies to sleep.
I like that phrase. Bore them to bed. I like that phrase.
Yeah.
But they do. Some little ones are, and actually going back to what you said about staying in, my whole approach for naps is that they don't have to be in the cot to count, which is why I've always been a massive fan of SnoozeShade, because it's staying in all day, especially in the first 6 months of life, when short, frequent naps and rinse and repeat are very age appropriate and biologically normal. It can really have an impact on your mental and physical health, staying in all day.
Absolutely. Funnily enough, I was having this chat because I work from home, and I find it quite difficult sometimes because I work from home all the time. And I certainly, as I say, I had postnatal depression after I had Holly, and I went from, having quite a big career to being at home all day with a baby, and, and doing the whole staying in while she had her naps and all the rest of it. And, it's tough, because you feel very isolated, I think for me, I've always said a happy mummy is a happy baby. That's it. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about breastfeeding, sleep, whatever. Within reason, but a mum who is feeling good in herself will always be like oozing good hormones towards her baby, versus a mum who's tired, stressed, and doesn't know what to do with herself because she's exhausted.
Yeah, and that's a massive benchmark for me, is whether it's working for parents, and that staying in I can really relate to. I think it was quite a way in. So I worked before I did Care It Out. I was a nanny for a long time.
Yeah, I have quite a lot of nannies use SnoozeShade actually.
And I was out and about all the time. I worked by myself with my colleagues, the kids I was looking after, but we were out and about and doing stuff. And then when I then scaled that back and started doing Care It Out more seriously, and I was working from home, I actually got very, very unwell. It took a real impact on my mental. I had no idea what was wrong with me. I kept waking up every morning crying. And I'm a very happy, positive person. So I was like, I just don't know. I don't know what's going on. But then I realised what was happening was, I think we are herd animals. We're meant to connect and be with other people. Even if I don't talk to people in the office because I'm too busy, like I'm busy bustling around doing stuff. My mental health really suffered from being at home, and it wasn't until I got out and started working in an office that was a game changer. So I'm really passionate about supporting parents, and there's so much pressure. There's so much pressure on parenting, especially this notion that naps have to be in a cot to count, like it's not proper sleep, or it's junk. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. It's junk sleep if they're napping in their buggy, and at night time that would be true. Like we can't, it's the same for us if we sleep on a train or a plane. It's not the same restorative sleep at night time. But during the day, melatonin levels are naturally low anyway because it's daytime. And I don't buy into that whole junk sleep. And I think it's really important for parents to get out and about and enable that. And
I was going to say, I think that it's the same with life generally. I'm all about a bit of this, 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. So I think, like if you want to do some naps at home, great. But then you've got the flexibility to go out if you want to.
Yeah.
And, again, I agree with you on the junk sleep at night. But if you're on holiday, for example, and you've got other children and you all want to go out for a meal and you've got a young baby, at least the baby's getting better quality junk sleep because they are actually probably sleeping. I mean, you wouldn't believe. I mean, I've had people telling me that, weddings, babies have slept through weddings, marathons, festivals, you name it, because actually sound doesn't seem to disturb them as much as what they see.
Yeah.
So they seem to sleep through much noisier environments than people kind of give them credit for. But it's more, from what I understand, I think it's something like it takes about 3 seconds for a baby's eyes to engage. And then that's it, their brain switches on. It's, the light comes on. And so if you can not let them get engaged, then actually they'll sleep anyway. So, I certainly advise taking a baby out to sleep every night. But, I certainly think also there's, sometimes you might eat in as a family and then other times you go out for a meal.
Oh, 100%. When I was talking about junk sleep, I mean, if you were sleeping if your little one was sleeping in a buggy the whole night or sleeping
that wouldn't be ideal anyway, would it, really? So, yeah.
But you'd be surprised what sometimes happens.
No, I wouldn't be. I'm sure I've tried some dodgy things at various points. I think everyone does it at some point, really.
Yeah, you have to do what you do to get through, I think, sometimes. But don't buy into that whole junk thing. But what I have found on my practice and from my experience is that some babies, for love nor money, will not sleep in the pram or whatsoever, and you can't force it. No. But for some, and I've definitely looked after a couple of those, and even with this, I could pull out all the stops and they just wouldn't go. Life was just too interesting. But what I have found is that some little ones I just think if I've learned anything from working with little ones, is they're all really different. And some babies are just more alert than others, especially as they come out of that 4th trimester. They're just like, everything they see is for the first time. It's so exciting.
Need less sleep because the other thing is we're all different individuals as adults, and I think we're all individuals as babies, and I'm sure there are some babies who probably don't need very much sleep in comparison to everybody else, but
we're all different.
I expect they're the rarity, but I also do quite passionately believe that the reason why a lot of babies don't sleep is because they're overstimulated.
Yeah.
And if you can remove the stimulation, they will sleep. I mean, I've literally had people, you know, who have, I mean, when I was at baby shows, I used to loan out a SnoozeShade, and I'd say, look, take it and try it. And they'd be like, yeah, poof, you know, it's not going to work, blah, blah, blah. And then they come back and they're like almost in tears. They're like, oh my God, you know, she's been asleep for an hour and a half, or, you know,
Yeah.
she's been, you know, she's never slept this long. And I said, well, because she can see everything. I wouldn't want to go necessarily either.
I've got a great saying, one of my favourites, is that playing is always going to be a priority, or peeping, like looking at everything, but sleeping is always going to be secondary. And some little ones find it so hard to switch off. And I've nicknamed the SnoozeShade the baby blinkers, because it just helps them. It switches off that stimulation. It's nice and dark. It's calming. They feel cocooned in, and it's almost like a sleep switch. It just helps them switch off.
Well, it is. I mean, the way I always describe it, it's like the curtains. It's a sleep trigger. You know, you pull the curtains in the nursery and they know it's sleep time. And, you know, I mean, my daughter used to actually ask for her SnoozeShade and her dummy. And by the way, I was one of those mothers who said that her child would never, ever have a dummy in the whole of her life. And then I think we had finally got it off her when she was about 3.5, 4 years old or something. But, you know, she used to literally go like dummy and SnoozeShade. And I've got other people I know of who say that their child actually asked for the SnoozeShade because they're tired and they want to go to sleep.
I love that when they're old enough to able to recognise, and that's just also patterns of familiar behaviour. So the more you do something, so the more you get into that routine. It might not be every single nap time or every single dinner time if you're on a holiday or you're on the beach, but the more times you do that, they start to associate that with going to sleep.
I mean, I always try and encourage people to use, I mean, often people buy it because they're going on holiday and they want a sunshade, because obviously the sun protection is absolutely critical as well. I mean, that's another thing, you know, as I say, I'm very, very passionate about, because, you know, it only takes one instance of sunburn for a child to have an increased risk of skin cancer by 50%, and 5 instances increases it by 80%. And, you know, I was born in the 70s. We all used olive oil, no factor protection, etc. And, you know, at the end of the day, I've got friends now having various things removed from faces and noses and ears and all the rest of it because, you know, we didn't slip, slop, slap. And, you know, and doctors worldwide, I mean, there is literally no doctor that you will ever get to say that a child should be in the sun if they're under 6 months old. They should not be in direct sunlight.
Yeah.
And so, you know, the great thing with SnoozeShade, even when they're 0 to 6 months is the original one, you can use it as a canopy. So basically what you do is you just pop it over the top, and it acts like a canopy, which means you don't have to worry about, you know, my biggest bugbear was the umbrella on the pram, you know, because you're constantly moving it around, shifting it, then it would, you know, you change directions on the street and the sun would move direction, etc. And, you know, you can use the original as a canopy, and then the older ones for older children, which are the Plus and the Plus Deluxe, you know, they've got a viewing panel on them anyway, so the child can see out, but the sun can't see in.
Yeah.
And, you know, and the sun protection side is really, really important. But what I often say to people is, you know, they'll often be buying it for holiday. And I say, well, you know, use it before you go, because, you know, get the baby used to it, get the child used to it. And then often when they come back, they're like, I'm never stopping using this. You know,
Yeah.
like people quite often say in reviews, you know, I bought it for a holiday and I'm going to carry on using it. And, you know, that's how well it works.
Yeah. I love it for also, when I was a nanny, a massive part of my job was travelling transatlantic with them. So I would always pack the trusty SnoozeShade as well. It saved my skin on nap laps.
People, it's so funny. I mean, I invented it to be used in one way, and actually even to this day I've got 4 pictures of how to use the original, for example, and 3 of those ways were told to me by parents on how they used it, because I invented it to be used in one way, and then they've shown me, like, they started using it as a canopy. I was like, oh, that's clever. And then they used it to increase the size of the hood, so there was more shade over the top and also over the bottom, so that protects the legs, so that if they're in the shade under a hood, you can protect their legs. So I was like, wow, this is really good. But then people go even one step further than that. I've had photos of people, they use them on airline bassinets, you know, to help them sleep, and also even just putting it. I've got some great photos one lady sent of her, and she's got the SnoozeShade over her head, over the top of the airplane seat, onto the other seat in front of her. So it's creating a canopy right over the top. And then she's holding the baby, and she's got a thumb sticking up because baby was asleep.
That's brilliant. I love it how we can all learn from each other.
Yeah, and I mean, also there was a photo someone sent the other day. They'd used it to cover a window that was a funny shape in the hotel they were staying in. I've actually used it to cover over the window in the car, because one time I got stuck in a traffic jam for 4 hours down in Devon, and it was about sort of 35 degrees. And I was worried about Holly burning, so I just happened to have a SnoozeShade with me, and I just put it on the window, and it took all the heat out immediately, and just meant I wasn't worrying about her getting too hot in the back.
I love that I wasn't laughing at you worrying about her getting sunburned. I love it. I just happened to have a SnoozeShade on my person.
Well, I think she was quite old at that point, so I think she was possibly out of the buggy.
I see what you mean.
So, but she was still in the back in the car seat. So, you know, so, you know, whilst did use it, I mean, I used it with Holly even up until she was about 5 years old, because you know, not because she was in the pram the whole time until she was 5, but, you know, when you go on holiday, you quite often take the pram with you, just so that you know, when they get tired in the evening, if you go out for a meal and it's a bit of a walk, she could sit in the pram and we just push her, just so.
Yeah, it's an extra bed.
Exactly. And then, you know, I remember we got there, for example, and it was one holiday, where were we? It was something like Tenerife or somewhere, and we got there, and then the bus that was supposed to be taking us from the airport to the hotel was delayed. They had some problem with the driver, and we had to sit around for about an hour and a half. Unfortunately, I had the buggy with us, so I just put Holly in there so she could sit in it, and then just chucked the SnoozeShade over, and that was it. Off she went, because, you know, she hadn't slept because we'd been travelling. I think we had to get a really early flight, and she just zonked out in the pram, and then they got on the bus, and then when we got to the hotel, I think I've got a photo of her somewhere, just zonked out again in the pram with the SnoozeShade over her, because she was just, you know, knackered. But then she liked using it as well, because she liked the fact that she didn't have to wear sunglasses with it, because she can have the front panel up so she could see out, but it was shaded. And she used to like that as well, so she'd actually ask for it.
I love that.
It was really sweet.
Who doesn't like wearing sunglasses? But she didn't like wearing sunglasses.
No. I mean, Holly wore sunglasses occasionally, but it was more the fact that, you know, if she fell asleep or something, then they'd come off anyway, and then they'd fall down. Yeah. Actually, the other thing that they're quite good for is toy collectors as well. It's toys falling out of the pram.
Yeah, I love that. I do have a couple of questions, because some of I put on my Instagram, did you have any questions?
Oh, right, okay.
Actually, I got loads of questions, but they basically came down to these 3 things. Can I ask them?
No.
It was nice talking to you, Cara.
Yeah.
Number 1, does it fit every single buggy?
I would say it fits about 99.9% of buggies. The ones that it doesn't fit, and I say as well, because you can make it fit. That's the thing. I mean, it's so flexible. Is some of them don't fit so well around things like the Stocky Explorer, where you've got the front bar. But actually, it was a parent who showed me what she did, and what she did is she actually bought the Plus or the Plus Deluxe, and they've got a horizontal zip across them. So what she did is she opened the horizontal zip, put the handlebar, turned it upside down. Basically, she used the SnoozeShade upside down, and so she put the horizontal zip over the handlebar, and then did it back up, and then just used it upside down on there. So I mean, hats off to parents for ingenuity. I mean, I have fitted it to the Stocky Explorer myself, and it can work, but it's just a bit more tricky. But it fits. I mean, 99% of prams are all the same shape when you fundamentally look at them. The only thing is the only reason people think sometimes it doesn't fit is because, as I said, there's a safety reason why I have more straps rather than 2 long ones. And they think that they have to attach every strap, which you don't have to do. So there are some, like the Bugaboo Chameleon, for example, because like you're a sleep geek, I'm a pram nerd. The Bugaboo Chameleon, for example, because the Bugaboo's got like a sort of built-in frame around it, you actually put it over the hood and then pull it, and the elastic around SnoozeShade actually holds it onto the frame. You don't even need to use the straps if you don't want to. Whereas other ones, you might use the top strap, a middle strap, and a bottom strap, and other ones you might actually attach the straps around the back of the pram to each other, not to the pram frame. So there are loads of demonstration videos and on YouTube of like how to do them. And also, if people get stuck, I mean, we always do say, and I mean it, I've got an amazing team of other mums who work with me. everybody who works with me pretty much on customer facing side is a mum, and we all know what it's like when you're like sitting there and you're like, you just want your child to go to sleep. How do I get this bloody thing on there, you know? So, you know, also just send in a picture to us and we'll have a look at it and make sure that you're fitting it right, because sometimes it's literally a case. I mean, I had one lady who was trying to fit something and it was actually upside down, and that's why it wasn't working.
That's really useful to know. I've used a lot of buggies in my career and I've always managed to get it to fit. However, I am so pedantic that I would always try and get the straps to, like, every single strap to fit.
You don't really need it often. I mean, to be honest, most of the time you probably need three straps. Sorry, that was my alarm going off. That's Holly. I love you, Mummy.
Oh, that's so cute. Is that Holly?
That's Holly, when she was little, and she sang me a little song, and so I use it as my ringtone, as my alarm.
So cute.
It's the only thing I can listen to every morning and not get annoyed by.
I like that idea.
But yes, I mean, you know, most of the time I would say most buggies that I've fitted, I can probably use like 3 of the straps. I mean, the original has 6 straps, the Plus and the Plus Deluxe have got 8. And I think that's why, because but the reason they've got that many is so that then you don't have to pull them around too much. You can just attach one here, one there, one there. And I do try and explain that on the packaging, but, you know, not everyone's got the time to read everything, so I totally get it.
No, that makes total sense. And then the other one, I'm not sure whether you'll have an answer for this, but I've never ever come across a little one that this has happened to. But in the very rare cases, the little one, the baby doesn't like this, like they're kicking it and they cry because the SnoozeShade is going on. Do you have any tips to help them get used to it?
Well, actually, what I would suggest doing, and this is what I do suggest doing usually, is to put it on in parts. Don't put the whole thing on immediately and cover them up. So, for example, the original is literally just the fabric with a zip down it. So, you know, just put it on maybe over the hood so it drapes down a bit, and then just sort of lower it gently rather than kind of putting it all on all in one go. And the same with the Plus and the Plus Deluxe. They've got front panels, so leave the front panel open. If you're worried about your baby being like that, I would always say get the Plus Deluxe, because that one, the panel's fully open, so then you can put it all over the pram, and then the front panel will be completely open. And then because it's got 2 zips, you can pull it up slowly, by bit by bit by bit. Look, I mean, there's also some children who it doesn't matter what you do, will not want to cover it up, and there's nothing you can do about that. But I do think sometimes, you know, people do, with the best of intentions, they do just kind of go, here you go, baby, off you go. You're going to like this. And actually, you know, who wants to go from being able to see the world and enjoying the sights to being shut off? Probably not that many people. So I think just introducing it slowly, often also introducing it once they're already asleep or not, so that, you know, it helps keep them asleep, and then they start to get used to it.
Yeah. That's great advice. I hadn't thought of doing it gradually, but I would often say do it once they're asleep, and then you can gradually build up from there. And also sometimes it is natural that they have a little bit of a protest, and it's like alien. They start kicking it or trying to put your arm out. But if they're not upset, it's always worth just trying to persevere a little bit, because
I'm not a big fan of cry it out or anything like that. You know, that's not my bag at all. And, you know, I'm a big believer in, you know, not letting babies cry unnecessarily, etc. But what I would say is that, you know, they don't want to go to sleep some of the time. And, you know, actually everyone has a grumble and a moan. And I think every parent knows the difference between their child grumbling and moaning versus kicking off and having a hissy fit.
Yeah.
So if your child's having a hissy fit, then, you know, judge whether or not it's the right product for you. I mean, you know, I'm not trying to pretend, you know, no product works for every person in the world. I mean, you know, so it might not work for every baby. But, you know, I would say it's worth trying it, because, you know, the results can really make life a lot easier.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And I think, again, that's why SnoozeShade really resonates with me, because I'm exactly the same. Like nobody can, there's no 100% guarantee with anything in life, and it's not like my sleep services, my products aren't like the online courses and stuff. They're not 100% given, but they are worth giving it a go.
Exactly.
I really like that. And then the last question that got sent in, but I think we've already touched it, is it safe? Like safety, but I think you've covered that already, that safety was absolutely key to you.
Well,
it's safe to use in the sun.
Oh, absolutely. I think the reason why people ask whether it's safe is because, I think you should always ask whether or not a product is safe if you're planning on using it with your child, and you should do some due diligence on it, because that's your job as a parent. But the other side of that is, I think the reason why people are particularly concerned with covering baby is because of the various stories that have been circulated on social media about the dangers of covering your baby in a pram. Now, I've actually written quite a long post on this on my website, and it's under the title of "Is SnoozeShade Safe?" because I had so many parents coming to me who were scared by these stories. And the sad thing is, these stories were actually created initially not from any medical research or scientific study, but by a journalist in, I can't remember if it was Denmark or, I think it was Denmark or Sweden, who basically put a pram in the sun with the winter cover on, the bit that goes over the top, left it in the sun, and then put a blanket on it and put a thermometer in there, and basically the temperature really heated up. He then went to a paediatrician who wasn't involved with the experiment in any way, but he showed her the numbers of the heat increase, and she said, "Oh my goodness me, that sort of level of heat increase is very dangerous and could kill a baby." Now, funnily enough, that story has now been circulated as fact in the, this is in some way scientifically valid. Now, my perspective on these things is that if I want to safety test or ensure that my products are safe, I actually do that, with an independent laboratory who test to standardized methods, which means that you can then test that product repeatedly, which I regularly test products. To certain standards to show that they are safe, or they pass or they don't pass. And in this instance, then what happened was, then there was another, it was Denmark again. It was somewhere in somewhere Scandinavia. I think it was Denmark again, or was it Norway? And there was a baby store retailer who again did a video of two prams, one with a muslin on and one without, in the blazing sun, and actually you can't even tell on the video what the time lapse is, and the shadows all move, etc., and that's all very scary. And then unfortunately what's happened is it's sort of moved into urban myth level that this is in some way a valid thing to be scared of. And actually it's not. I mean, I actually deal with quite a lot of midwives, and they see too many children with sunburn and sunstroke because they've been left out in the sun, and they just don't get anybody coming in because they've had a blanket put over the pram. That just doesn't happen. I also know, because I work in the industry, I know there are various genuine safety concerns about some products, including infant car seats, for example. So infant car seats, there have been various studies into them because of the fact there have actually been deaths from babies who've been left in the infant car seat too long because their lungs and their neck isn't strong enough to support them. Things like changing tables, where people have accidentally left babies rolled off, and babies have either died or been seriously injured. Now, there are various other things that, this is what happens with things like cot bumpers, is that there are genuine concerns from the medical world, and because they're looking at it, and if a company has a problem with a product, then there are various channels that you have to go through in order to allay concerns, etc. So they've just pulled, in the US, they're now recommending no one uses any of the inclined baby rockers. Because, and this was a Fisher-Price product, so you'd think that they would know better, but apparently the actual product was designed by somebody who worked for Fisher-Price, who was a mum, who thought it was a great idea because her baby had reflux and it had worked quite well being inverted. But they've actually had quite a few deaths from this product. I mean, for me personally, if I had one single death from a SnoozeShade, I'd shut the business down, frankly. If it was anything to do with my product, that is. I mean, obviously, but but the reality is the reason why people ask, I mean, as I said, a parent should always be worried about the safety of a product and do some due diligence.
I agree.
But at the same time, also, don't be scared by things that have been created on social media to scare you in order that you share. So, for example, the videos that I've mentioned, they've had millions, and I'm talking multi-millions now, worth of shares. And all the stories that you read about babies, the dangers of covering a baby in a pram, actually all originate from nothing but that one journalist who put a pram in the sun and put a blanket over it. That's where it comes. They refer to a study in Sweden. That's what they're referring to. Now, I couldn't consider, if I say my product's got sun protection, it's because it protects from the sun. I wouldn't put my daughter in the pram, leave her there all day, and then if she didn't burn, say, well, it must have sun protection.
Yeah. Makes
sense.
And
even which, recently, a friend of mine who has a product was tested by Which. And I've always trusted Which, and I've had my products tested by Which before. In fact, they did a test and they did a similar study to the pram one. They were very irresponsible, and I don't actually believe their numbers either, which was because they claimed that they had an ambient temperature on the day that we didn't actually achieve in the UK that year until something like August. They can be, I think, also, potentially, I think, you have to always look at what people's reasons are for doing things. And, whilst we trust the media, you have to remember the media are also trying to sell their packaging. They're trying to sell themselves and get their stories shared. I think absolutely do due diligence. And I think any decent product manufacturer, would be happy to answer any safety questions any parent has got about their product. I think the problem is obviously when you're dealing with very large companies is finding the people to talk to. But certainly if anyone has an issue at all about it, as I say, I've got a whole article which I'm afraid is rather long, but it literally covers every element.
What I will do, Cara, because I've already read that and it was really interesting, I will put it in the show notes for the people listening.
Yeah, great, because you'll see my level of obsession. And also
sleep obsessed.
But also the fact that actually science backs it up. If you've got an air permeable fabric, that means that air passes through it. So how does heat, which is hot air, build up in something where the air can pass through? Because that's what you're worried about. You're worried about it being like a car, a glass construction where absolutely you need to have windows open and air circulating. But in a pram, the actual structure itself is open, so you don't get babies suffocating to death when they're using a rain cover, which is plastic. Because air circulates around the pram regardless of the cover. So this is where I think, because I get people saying, does it stop oxygen, will the baby suffocate? It's like, well, how can they? There's air.
It's natural to worry, but I think it's very important to, like yourself, I'm very much safety first. I think it's really good to address that. And what I will do, I will put the YouTube demo in the show notes as well, just in case anybody's listening and having trouble fitting it to their buggy, or if they buy one and finding it hard. I will
just come to us as well. Email us hello@SnoozeShade.com. As I said, everyone who's on that email is a mum. We get it, a parent, whatever. And, if you're not sure about something, just ask us. That's what we're here for. I think that's one of the things I think, that I think I excel at and ensure that the whole team does is customers come first, Customer has a question that has to be answered and quickly, because I'm a very impatient customer myself, you see. So I hate it when I get those emails, when I email in somewhere and they say, we will answer your query within 3 to 5 working days or within 48 hours or whatever. I'm like, no, I want an answer now.
I love that.
So that's the way I run the business, is that, we drop everything if a customer asks a question. And, fortunately, we've got YouTube demos coming out of our ears. We've got answers to safety questions. We've got all of that. So we can, it's just a matter of making sure that you get it.
Okay. I will also drop an email at hello@SnoozeShade. I hear you. That one. And the other thing is that you very, very generously, I feel that coming, in fact, we've gone full circle now right to the beginning, and there's not many parenting products I get right behind and champion. I've got personally have used them and absolutely love them, and SnoozeShade for me has always done that. In my nannying days, I'm very clear I'm not a parent yet, and I love that. Really, well, I love lots of things about SnoozeShade, but I really love that it's a very affordable parenting product, and you haven't put the prices up over the last 10 years. I think that's amazing. But you've also very generously given the listeners a discount, haven't you?
Yes, indeed. Yes. So I think they get 10% off with Care It Out 10, I think it is. But my brain's a bit fried. So if you pop that in there, then and that's on SnoozeShade.com. Directly. So, and it's free UK shipping. So, anyone who wants to try it, feel free. And if it doesn't work for your baby, you can send it back. It's really not a problem. To be fair, we get so few returns. I'm very comfortable saying send it back if it doesn't work.
Amazing. That's really, again, so much love for you, Cara, and the SnoozeShade. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on today and talking to you. I feel like I've definitely learned loads, so I'm really hoping it'll be useful for our listeners. I will put the discount code in the show notes as well, as long as with all the other things, the demo, the blog, and the link to your email. Cara, thank you so much for coming and talking to us. Any last bits of wisdom?
Well, I think just a couple of things I think I've picked up over the years, which I think we've discussed already. I'd always say I've got sort of three tips, which is always look for sleep cues for your baby, because I think we live such busy lives, it's easy to miss when baby's trying to tell us that they're tired. Stay safe in the sun, because it is really important, and I think it's going to get more and more important, especially as we get warmer and warmer. And finally, I think just don't stress. Try not to stress. A happy parent is a happy, equals a happy baby, and none of us do everything right all the time. It's just not possible, and we all do our best, and I think that's all we can ever expect from ourselves. And so, don't go too hard on yourself.
Yeah, well, they're lovely little pearls of wisdom there, Cara. I like those. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and I will hopefully speak to you again soon.
Lovely. Well, it's been absolutely delightful.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to me, your host, Cara Sayer, on the Cara Out Sleep Show. I really hope you found the podcast reassuring, informative, and a little bit fun. If you did, please don't forget to subscribe to the show below, and I'd be so grateful if you could leave me some fabulous feedback. I always love hearing from you, and one lucky listener will win lifetime access to my Bedtime Basics e-course every single month. My next podcast episode will be out in 2 weeks' time, but if you can't wait for more of my sleep shizzle, you can find me over on Instagram at Cara Out Sleep Consultant. I update my sleep squares and speak sleep there on the daily. Big love and sleep solidarity to you all.